I was still making coffee when she whispered it. I can't feel you anymore. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just folded her sweater, left it on the chair, and walked out, like she'd already said goodbye 1,000 times in her head. You ever have someone leave without raising their voice, and somehow it cut deeper than any scream ever could? There was no fight, no slammed door, no betrayal, but something shattered that morning, not in her, in me, because I had no idea how much she'd already left before she actually walked away. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're there right now. You wake up next to someone you built your life with, but now you feel like a stranger in your own marriage. You talk, but it's just logistics. You touch, but it's just habit. You sit across from her at dinner. But the silence between you says, everything neither of you can. You didn't mean for this to happen. You provided. You showed up. You stayed faithful. You did everything you thought a good man should do, but something got lost between all the doing and never quite feeling. And now you're left wondering, how did she go from being your everything to feeling like someone you used to know? The kids are grown. The house is full of things, but empty of presence. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to realize she didn't leave because you were bad. She left because she couldn't feel you anymore, and maybe neither could you. I met Rick last year, 62 years old, retired contractor, hands rough from decades of work, but soft-spoken, kind. He was married 34 years. No cheating, no yelling, no abuse, just quiet, the kind of quiet that builds like dust on furniture, until one day you realize nothing's been touched in years. I never hurt her, Rick told me. I never betrayed her. I paid the mortgage. I showed up. I was there. He looked down for a moment, then added softly, but I was never really with her, not in the way she needed. Rick said the first time his wife cried in front of him, he got up and poured her a glass of water, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to stay in that room with all that feeling. So he did what he knew. He made himself useful. He poured. He fixed. He left her alone. And slowly, she stopped crying in front of him altogether. Every time she reached for his heart, he gave her logic. Every time she asked for connection, he gave her distance. Not to hurt her, but to protect himself. He thought calmness was love. He thought silence was safety. He thought not reacting was being a good man, but what she needed was for him to be seen, to feel with her. Over time, their words shrank, from stories to schedules to silence, and then one morning she left. No screaming, no rage, just a note that read, I can't feel you anymore, and I've stopped trying. Rick told me something I'll never forget. I didn't lose her the day she left. I lost her in every moment. I chose control over presence. In every sigh I ignored. In every time I walked away, instead of staying with her pain. And then he said, the words every man needs to hear. I was so afraid of being vulnerable. I didn't realize I was disappearing. Rick's story isn't rare, it's painfully common, because most men weren't taught how to leave. They were taught how to disappear, slowly, quietly, emotionally. And the truth is, you don't have to scream to lose someone. You just have to stop feeling. Psychologist John Gottman calls this stonewalling. One of the 4 habits that silently kill love. Not fighting, not cheating, but the act of checking out while staying in the room. Going cold, going quiet, withdrawing when connection is most needed. And here's the thing, stonewalling isn't strength, it's fear. Fear of being overwhelmed, fear of being wrong, fear of being seen. Because somewhere along the way, you were taught to be tough, to fix, to protect, but you were never taught how to feel with someone. And then there's Carl Jung, who saw something deeper. He said, we don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with symbols, with what they awaken inside us, with the mirror they hold up to the parts of ourselves we've buried. Every man carries inside him an image of the feminine. Jung called it the Anima. She represents everything we long for but deny ourselves. Softness, warmth, safety, soul. And when a woman comes along who touches that part of us, we don't just love her. We love who we are when we're with her. But if we're not ready to meet that part of ourselves, we don't stay. We run, we sabotage, we say, she's too much, she wants too much. Or worse, we go quiet and disappear because she's not just asking us to show up for her, she's asking us to show up for ourselves. And that is terrifying. So we stay in the garage, we stay behind the newspaper, we stay inside the version of ourselves that feels safe but slowly starves the relationship we once prayed for. Rick didn't lose her because he was cruel. He lost her because she reached for his heart, and he didn't know where he'd hidden it. But what if there was another way? What if healing didn't start with fixing her, but by finally facing you? So where do we begin? If you're like most men I've spoken to, you probably think you need to fix everything before you can come back. You think you need the right words, the grand gesture, the solution, but maybe you don't need to fix anything, at least not yet. Maybe all you need is one moment of honesty, one moment of presence, one moment of truth. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to feel you again. Can we start with that? Those words, spoken with no defense, no performance, no armor, can shift more than 1,000 apologies ever could. Because when a man puts down his need to be perfect and instead chooses to be present, something sacred happens. You're not trying to win her back. You're not trying to explain yourself. You're not making promises you don't know how to keep. You're doing the bravest thing a man can do. You're staying in the discomfort, staying with your own shame, staying with her pain without trying to erase it, because healing doesn't begin when everything is okay. It begins the moment you stop running from what hurts. No woman ever needed a man to have all the answers. But what breaks her, what leaves her most alone, is when the man she loves goes silent in the moments that matter. It's not about flowers or fancy dinners. It's about sitting across from her and saying, I see you, I hear you, and I'm here, even if I don't know what to say. This isn't about being soft. It's about being real. It takes far more courage to sit with someone's brokenness than to pretend everything's fine. It takes more strength to cry in front of your partner than to hold it all in until you explode. And maybe, just maybe, it's not too late. Maybe she's still there, maybe not. But this isn't just about her anymore. This is about you, about who you become when you finally decide to stop disappearing from your own heart, because starting again doesn't mean becoming a new man. It means remembering the one you were before the fear took over, the boy who used to feel everything, the man who still wants to be held, the soul that still longs to be understood, not for what he does, but for who he is. And if you're sitting there, wondering if it's too late, let me tell you this, it's not too late to speak, to stay, to feel, to begin again. Because what if she wasn't asking you to be perfect? What if all she ever wanted was for you to bring your whole self back to the table, even the scared, messy, hurting parts? So many men believe they lost the woman they loved, but the truth is deeper than that. What you lost wasn't just her. It was the part of you that only came alive in her presence. The version of you that softened when she smiled, that listened more deeply. That let his guard down. Just for a moment, you didn't just lose a relationship. You lost access to a part of yourself you hadn't touched in decades, and that's why it hurts. Even after months, even after years. Not because she was perfect, not because the love was flawless, but because she awakened a man in you forgot how to be. Carl Jung called it the process of individuation, a journey where you don't just build yourself. You meet yourself, all of yourself, even the parts you've denied, especially the ones, your sadness, your longing, your tenderness, your ache to be seen, your secret wish to fall into someone and not be asked to carry the world for once. She didn't just love you. She mirrored back what was possible in you. That's why it shook you. That's why you felt exposed. That's why you ran or shut down or got smaller. Because her love didn't flatter your ego. It confronted your soul. She wasn't asking for more of your money or your time or your control. She was asking for the one thing you were never taught how to give, your full emotional presence. And when you couldn't offer that, not because you didn't care, but because you didn't know how, she left. Not to punish you, not to shame you, but because staying would have meant betraying herself, and that is sacred. You see, she didn't come into your life to stay. She came into your life to wake you up, to shake something loose, to light a fire in a place inside you that had gone cold from years of survival. And when her role was complete, she left. Like a storm that doesn't ask permission. Like a teacher who leaves when the lesson's been delivered, and it doesn't make the pain easier, but it makes the meaning clearer, because the love you experienced with her, the love you still remember, wasn't just about her. It was about the youth that came alive in that mirror. That's the beauty of Jung's work. He didn't teach us to chase love. He taught us to notice who we become when we feel deeply, when we project, when we're vulnerable, when we lose control. Because in those moments, our unconscious rises to the surface and shows us exactly what we've hidden from ourselves. Maybe she represented your longing to be held without proving anything. Maybe she reminded you of your mother's absence, or your father's silence, or the first girl who made you feel like you were enough. Maybe she wasn't the one. Maybe she was the mirror, and the pain you feel now isn't the loss of her, but the loss of what she reflected. So don't just grieve her. Grieve the version of you that you stopped being when she left, and then begin again, not by chasing another woman, not by numbing the ache, but by following it all the way inward. Because individuation is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering the parts of you that were always there, but never welcome to the surface. It's about facing your shadow, your needs, your guilt, your grief, and integrating them into a whole man, the man who doesn't run from intimacy, the man who can cry and not apologize, the man who stays, the man who knows his silence was never protection, it was a prison, and now he's ready to step out. So what if she wasn't your ending? What if she was the threshold that brought you to the doorway of your own soul? What if she left not to punish you, but to liberate you? She didn't leave because you were unworthy. She left because you were unfinished. And now the work is yours. And maybe if you're brave enough to walk through this, you'll find her again. Or maybe you won't, but you'll find yourself. And that was always the point. So maybe now you're sitting there quiet, thinking about someone who once looked at you like you were the only man in the world, someone who didn't ask you to be perfect, just present, someone who didn't want everything from you, just something real, just you. And maybe you didn't know how to give that back then. Maybe you still don't fully know how, but you feel something now, something waking up inside you. Something you buried a long time ago under responsibility, silence and strength. So let me ask you, have you ever loved someone, not because she completed you, but because she made you feel like you were worth completing? Have you ever lost someone and only realized later that what you were really grieving was the man you were in her presence? Or maybe, just maybe, you were the one who touched someone's soul without ever trying. You were the mirror. You were the threshold, you were the awakening, and then you left. Not out of pride, but out of love, out of self-respect. If any part of this story touched something in you, I want to hear from you. Tell me your story. Maybe it was a goodbye you never understood. Maybe it was a woman you still think about. Maybe it was a version of yourself you lost. And now you're trying to find your way back. Whatever it is, put it in the comments. Because your story, no matter how quiet, how unfinished, how painful, might be exactly what another man needs to heart tonight. You're not alone. You were never broken, and it's not too late to begin again. If this message spoke to your soul, subscribe, share it with a friend who needs it, and above all, stay with yourself. Because the world doesn't need more men pretending, it needs more men remembering who they really are.